Steve, all this is happening in the context, the backdrop of the U.S. economy, which continues to fascinate for a number of reasons, as we all look to see whether the Fed is going to be able to engineer the soft landing. Some people say it already has, and some people say, whoa, no, 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 we got a long way to go. So I believe you've been looking into the inflation numbers a little bit. And as we think about, the presentation of the budget and what the president will talk about on the economy with the State of the Union, uh, what is the backdrop? What's the context on inflation here?
Well, we've talked on the show a few times about, what appears to be a disconnect between, how well the economy is doing and the sour, pessimistic mood of the public in terms of why they don't appreciate how good the economy is. And I want to sort of put this into context. So, you know, inflation, what we normally measure inflation, the consumer price index, it peaked in the summer of 2022 at almost 9%. So, a year over year basis, 2 years ago, inflation was 9%. This past summer, it came down to about 3%, huge improvement going from 9 to 3. But, that means prices are still rising about 3% a year on a year over year basis. And they've been, bumping around at that level basically since this past fall. And the most recent number also was around the 3% target. So to put that into context, the 9% peak going down to 3% on average since the beginning of 2019, so the year before the pandemic, inflation has averaged about 4%. So over the last 5 years, inflation grew 4% a year. So what does that mean for the average consumer? Well, 4% inflation over 5 years is about a 20% rise in prices. So one way to think about it is for every dollar that you make today relative to a dollar you made in 2019, that dollar only buys 80 cents worth of goods and services. So you've lost 20% of your purchasing power as a result of the average of 4% inflation over 5 years. Alternatively, the Fed's target of 2%, if you had 2% inflation over 5 years, that means that prices would have risen by about 10%. So instead of your dollar buying 80 cents under the 4% inflation, your dollar would buy 90 cents under 2% inflation. So basically, purchasing power, in terms of people feeling bad about the economy, if your dollar is only getting 80 cents relative to the Fed's target of 90 cents, 90 cents, you could argue, well, what happened to my dime? Who stole that? But to lose 20 cents, that obviously is twice as bad as 10 cents. Another way to think about this, mortgage rates. So the median home price is around $400,000. Back in January of this year, that was the median price of a home sale. If mortgage rates were 3.5%, which is what they were a year or two ago, your monthly payment, principal and interest, would be about $1,800. Interest rates, mortgage rate, 30-year mortgages are approaching 7%. So if you doubled interest rates, mortgage rates from 3.5 to 7, your payment would go from $1,800 a month to $2,700 a month, which is a 50% increase roughly. So, if you're trying to buy a new home and instead of buying a home at 3.5% interest, you're buying it at 7% interest, you do the calculation and you realize your mortgage payment is now 50% higher than it was 2 years ago. So, you can explain a lot of people's sour mood. They, don't want to pay 50% more for their monthly mortgage. They don't want to pay 20% more or buy 20% less with their dollar when they go to the grocery store. So yeah, you can say inflation's coming down, but that just means the rate of increase is less. It doesn't mean that people's purchasing power has risen.